Hello, everyone. I'm Angie Christensen, and I want to welcome you to this class on building healthy food storage. Before we dive into all the practical tips I'm going to share with you today, I want to just really briefly introduce myself so that you know the perspective and the experience that I am bringing to this class. I have an incredibly intense passion and personal conviction of the power of the things I'm going to teach you today, because I have essentially lived two different lives in my 40 something years on this earth. I have lived one life where I was very passive about my own health. I kind of just went with the flow. I did what doctors told me to do. And I was incredibly, incredibly ill. And that compounded until I reached the point that my life was very much on the line. As a teenager, the diagnosis has started for me. I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia. I had depression and anxiety. I had allergies. I had interstitial cystitis. I had IBS. And those things were all kind of managed at that point in my life through multiple prescriptions. I was on 3 prescriptions every day just to keep functioning. As I became an adult and went into my adult years, I added to that some additional diagnoses, but the one that really changed my life was really severe endometriosis. And mine was so aggressive that it literally was eating through all my abdominal organs. And so I had 6 surgeries in 5 years where they were trying to control all of that, but I was just losing more and more pieces and organs from my abdomen as they were destroyed by this disease. And when I hit that 6th surgery, I realized that I was going to die because I was running out of expendable parts. And despite doing everything that medical science had to offer, I was getting sicker and sicker by the year. And so I had this amazing pivotal day in my life where I was standing in the living room of our apartment at the time. I can still remember where I was. And I just realized, you know what? This is my life. This is my body. And instead of being passive about this and just waiting for someone else to figure this out, I am going to figure this out. And it was a major turning point because I was no longer just waiting. I was no longer relying on people who, even though they were trying to help me, they had their own lives, and it was a doctor's appointment that lasted, 30 minutes or whatever. And then they went back to their life, and my life was falling apart. And so I became personally responsible for my own health and my own body. And the fact that I had never done that before in my life is a really sad commentary both on me and on our culture. But the minute I did that, everything changed. Everything in my life changed. And I jumped headfirst into the world of holistic health because I had already expended everything that Western medicine had to offer. And when I jumped into that world, it is a world. Like as I have worked at that time and since to address physical needs in my life, in my family's life, what I have found is the challenge is not finding solutions, it is choosing them, because there are actually so many things out there that are profoundly healing, even to things we have deemed in Western medicine to be incurable, that it is a whole new world. And the first place I jumped was in nutrition, because the one thing that everybody agrees on is the number one thing we can do to improve our health is to change what we eat. But the problem I discovered, and I'm sure what all of you have discovered, is that nobody agrees what that is. And so healthy eating doesn't even mean anything anymore. There's so many people who say they're trying to eat healthy, who feel they're trying to eat healthy, and yet they don't see the changes in their health that they're expecting. And a lot of that is because so many things that have been deemed healthy are actually not in harmony with how the human body works. And so I jumped in there to try to figure this out. I knew there had to be truth at the bottom, truth that was true for everybody, that never changed, that wasn't up for debate, that wasn't going to change next year. And I discovered 4 things, 4 principles that are exactly that. You can take to the bank. They will absolutely be true a million years from now. They were true a million years ago. And they will change your life and change your health. For me, I was able within a very short amount of time to get off all of my prescriptions. I was able to reverse those diseases that are irreversible. Fibromyalgia is not something that I've had to deal with now in 20 years. The endometriosis, I have not had another surgery since that day. And it's been 20 years since then, and the IBS was gone in a matter of weeks. I mean, just so many things, all of those things just instantly resolved. And it's given me the personal experience to be able to say, when we learn how to change what we're eating to actually be in harmony with how the human body works, the human body works. It is that simple. We're ignorantly doing so many things that undermine our health that we just don't realize what we are doing. And so that was the changing point in my life, and it's literally given me an entirely different life. And it's given me the tools that since then I faced other things that have come up, including a massive colon tumor that I have been able to reverse with these same principles. It doesn't matter what you face, we have the tools we need to be healthy. And the reason that that's so important in what we're going to talk about today with food storage is that when it comes time for an emergency, we want to be doing everything we can to support our health. So today I'm going to take you and teach you exactly how to do that. So let me just really quickly turn on the PowerPoint here. Okay, so now let's talk about exactly how to build healthy food storage. Now, I briefly mentioned this. There is no more important time to be healthy than during an emergency. And I have taught this class for a lot of years, but we have now experienced the reality of this. This can't even be anything to debate anymore, because when we hit an emergency, we need our health to be at its best, not its worst. Because one of the things that is always going to happen during an emergency is an increase in disease. That's just what the reality is, because anytime there's an emergency, there's going to be increased stress, which dramatically impacts our immune system. You're going to have either increased isolation, or you're going to have increased concentration of people, depending on which type of emergency you are dealing with and whether people are in, like, you know, having to gather together to have shelter and support and food and things that they need, or we are experiencing the isolation of a pandemic. But in either case, these are things that are going to increase the stress and the demands on our immune system, and yet we're going to be at a time when disease is actually spreading more than any other time. In any emergency, this is the case, even if the nature of the emergency is not disease-based. Because of those other factors that are always going to happen in an emergency, the spread of disease is something that is always initiated and happens during any kind of emergency. So if we know that's the situation that we're going to be dealing with, we do not want to be eating things that sabotage our immune system. We just don't. I call this the Bermuda Triangle of food storage, okay? Because what you have is you've got the physical and emotional stress is one point of your triangle. You've got the actual physical scenario that is increasing disease that we just talked about. And then we have the food that we tend to be eating tends to be incredibly unhealthy. And when you combine those three things, you have disaster. But the one thing that you have complete control that you can completely dismantle that triangle of disease is by the food that you're eating. And with that one thing, you can change the entire equation. We have enormous power. That's another thing that we're discovering happens in any kind of an emergency is we start to lose our sense of power, because it seems like all of these things are happening to us. But one of the things you retain power of is what food you have chosen to store. And it gives you an enormous power to completely dismantle the Bermuda Triangle of disease. So you have to think for a minute, what is your goal of food storage? Is your goal to not be hungry? Unfortunately, that's what most people are thinking when they just don't want to be hungry. But that can't be our goal if we want to dismantle that Bermuda Triangle of disease. Our goal has to be actually to strengthen and support our body, and there's nothing that does that more than food. Nothing. Let me show you exactly why that is the case. So this is a object lesson I did when I was teaching a nutrition class for a foot zoning school, and I did this to help them be able to really visualize it. And we're going to do just a really brief overview of this now, but it's a really powerful thing to be able to put in your head to see exactly how this works. I want you to look at these two Lego towers, okay? I divided the group into two groups, and I gave them both the same blueprint, and I gave them a set of Legos, and I asked them to build the blueprint. Now, as you can see, those two structures turned out dramatically different, but they both still had the same blueprint. The difference was the blocks. Really think about this for a second. Your body has a divine blueprint on how to function, but the only thing it has to carry out that blueprint is the food you put inside your mouth. That is it. It has zero access to any other building blocks. You have 100% control over the building blocks your body is given to carry out its divine blueprint. Now, your body is absolutely amazing, and you can give it really crummy blocks for an extended period of time, and it's going to do its very best. And as you can see from that structure on the right, it's still going to sort of look like a body, right? Like your body's still going to look like your body. You can tell it's trying, but the thing is, it is weak. If you look at that Lego tower on the right, it literally can be blown over. All it takes is a gust of wind. And unfortunately, that's how most bodies are in our modern era, because the building blocks that we put in are completely mismatches for our body's blueprint. And it's doing its best, but all it takes is a germ. All it takes is an emotional trauma. All it takes is an environmental toxin, and the body caves because its structure is so weak. But that is not how it has to be. Our blueprints are okay, and this is something I teach in much more detail in my other classes, but there's a huge difference between genetics, over which we don't have any control, and the entirely new field that has recently been discovered called epigenetics, which is what controls how your genes translate into your actual body function. And we have control over our epigenetics, enormous control, which is why even government agencies will say that 75% of all disease is completely in our control based on what building blocks we have put in our body. Even if we have defective genes, we can, with epigenetics, change how that manifests in our body. We have enormous power. And so if you give your body the right building blocks, you can create a strong structure. And then guess what? You are exposed to a germ, even a pandemic, possibly deadly germ, and you are okay. If you want to see why pandemics are so destructive in our world, you will know by the end of this class, because you will be able to see exactly why we have built the majority of the human bodies in this world to look like the structure on the right. And so a germ comes by and we fold. Our bodies are meant to fight off disease. They know how to do that. If you struggle immunity, or if you study immunity, you're going to see that there's two completely different schools of thought. And one is based on trying to limit our exposure, and this is the germ killing thought, right? This is the whole thought of antibiotics and chlorine and isolation and all these things we do because we think that the key to not getting sick is not being exposed to germs. But the other theory is called the terrain theory. And that is whether a germ can take up habitation and actually do any damage in your body is completely under your control because of the terrain that you create. And you can create terrain that is inhospitable to germs. So do you want to be a victim and play into this whole thing of, oh my gosh, I have to sanitize everything and I have to avoid everything and I have to blah, 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 blah. Or do you want to actually learn how to build a body that you no longer have to be exposed to germs or afraid of germs, even if you're exposed? Very important difference there. One way I learned this was watching my animals. We raise animals, and you know what? My animals have never once asked me if their water was sanitized. And you know what? It isn't. They're perfectly fine. They get sick so much less than humans because of how their bodies work, so that if they do get something in the water, if the Giardia comes through, their body can completely eliminate it. And our bodies know how to do that too, if we will just support them. So let's show you how to do this with food storage. Let's show you how you can actually construct your food storage so that your body looks like this structure on the left. And then even if there's a pandemic, even if there's something serious going through, your body is equipped to get through it without folding. Think how much power to change the world is in that one little truth. So much power. As I teach people about nutrition, people usually come to me feeling like the person in this picture, and I certainly have felt like the person in this picture, where you're honestly trying to eat healthy, but there's so many theories that you never know if you're doing it right? And by the time you try to do something, they tell you to do the exact opposite, and it's absolutely demoralizing, it's frustrating, it's discouraging. And so we end up in the place that either we're afraid of food in general, or we kind of just give up and go back to the Oreos. And neither one of those approaches help our health. So I want to teach you a completely different way to go about nutrition, or anything else in your life. This works for anything. We can learn from theories, which change constantly, or we can learn from patterns that never change. The power of patterns is why we study history. It's why we study geology. It's why we study scripture. Why is something that happened 2,000 years ago in another country, in another culture, relevant? Because there is a pattern there. And if we are willing to learn the patterns and adjust our behavior to match patterns, we can save ourselves so much agony. And like I say, this applies in politics. This applies in medicine. This applies in religion. This applies in anything you want to pick. The power of really learning how to make decisions that are not subject to the whims and the opinions of the people around us is to learn through patterns. Okay, this is a scripture. I give you a pattern in all things, all, A-L-L, zero exceptions. I give you a pattern in all things that you may not be deceived. So let's learn how to do that with food, and then I'm going to show you how it applies to food storage. So as I studied and studied and studied and studied, and I dug my head into medical textbooks and I did all of these things, here's what I discovered. You can actually put all of that stuff away because God has created the earth to be a textbook. And I promise, stick with me through this hour of this class and you will be astounded by the end, I promise, at the power of the earth to be a textbook. Not only do I absolutely believe with every fiber of my being that the solution to every problem that we have was already placed on this earth at the time of creation. It was not just thrown together. Everything we need is here. I have also discovered how everything we need is actually been put here in a way to actually teach us what to do with it. And so I looked for the things that were truth. And for something to be a truth for me, it has to be true for every person in every situation, in every culture, in every time, zero exceptions. And I found that when it comes to our bodies and how do we actually construct that strong structure instead of that weak structure, there are four truths 4 truths that will help you do that. And I call them the 4 cornerstones. And in this class today, I'm going to teach you the 4 cornerstones and then show you exactly how each one of those applies specifically to the topic of food storage. So some of you may have had other classes from me before, and you may have learned these 4 cornerstones, but today I'm going to show you how the cornerstones apply to food storage. So by the end of this class, you will know exactly how to approach food storage in a way that will give you that strong structure so that no matter what is happening around you in stress, in disease, in whatever, you have the food that will literally help your body to function in a way that it can resist all the stresses and exposures that are going on around it. Okay, so if you think about cornerstones, when we build a building, those 4 cornerstones, if you put them in correctly, the whole building will turn out right. If you put them in wrong, it doesn't matter how hard you try. From that point on, the building cannot turn out right. But the other thing that's amazing about cornerstones is that you can have 4 cornerstones and build 3 buildings next to each other, all with the same cornerstones. And it still allows for an enormous amount of adaptation in the rest of the building. So you may think that if I teach you these 4 cornerstones, all of you are going to have the exact same things in your food storage. And that actually is not true, not at all, because every human body is different, but the cornerstones are absolutely the same. So if you learn how these 4 cornerstones work, you can then adapt to your own needs and still keep everything in harmony so that your structure is strong. If you get the 4 cornerstones wrong, it will not matter how hard you try to eat healthy. It will not work. It won't work. And I don't say that out of egotism because these 4 cornerstones are not mine. You're going to see that. I just happen to be the one who's teaching and trying to help people see things from this perspective. This isn't mine. This is how the earth teaches us to use food because the earth is trying to support our health. And what you'll see is that these are so ingrained in the patterns of the earth that we weren't even supposed to have to think about it. We weren't even supposed to have to know this. Before 1800, you couldn't not eat this way. Did I say that right, or did I throw in a double negative? Anyway, you had to eat in harmony with the 4 cornerstones because it's so important that the earth was literally created to make it happen automatically. The problem is that in our modern era, we have found so many ways to override what the earth was trying to do that now we have to be consciously aware of these and we have to make the choice to live this way. The good news is you absolutely still can make the choice to live this way. So let's show you what they are consciously so that you can make the choices to live the way the earth was trying to teach us to live all along. Okay, cornerstone number 1 is eat what God or nature created. Now, if you have a little bit of a duh reaction to that, that's good. Because these should be a little bit of duh, but their application is mind-blowing. So why is this so important? We're going to talk about 2 ways this really works. The things that were created on this earth are an ideal match for our body because the same creator that made your body made the things your body needs, and a creator is the only one who knows how to do that. And so we have to trust the system. There's 2 ways in which these foods interact with our body. The first is frequency. And we now have computers that can literally measure the frequency of the food that we eat. But the higher the frequency your body is functioning at, the less susceptible it is to disease. And the foods that God and nature grow for us have an incredibly high frequency. And so when we put them into our body, the frequency of our body goes up. And that automatically makes us resistant to disease. Man created foods, things that come in boxes and packages and cans and have things that don't even exist on the earth that have been manufactured and created in laboratories. They have a very low frequency. And as soon as we put them into our body, the frequency of our bodies drops. and that increases our tendency to illness. Okay, so that's the number one way it affects us. The second is shape, and this is the building block concept. So when something goes into your body, it literally has each component of that food has a biochemical shape, and each one of those has a job, and they have a place where they fit in the human body like a puzzle. And when they fit together in that puzzle, they turn a body function on or they turn a body function off. And so if those puzzle pieces don't quite match, what's going to happen? Okay, you can see what's going to happen. So here's an analogy to help you kind of wrap your head around this. And I call this the car analogy. If you get a brand new spanking car, I want you to imagine this car. This is the car you have always wanted. Like if you could pick any car on the earth and you did not have to pay for it, what car would you choose? Now I want you to imagine that you get a phone call one day and this car has been gifted to you. All you have to do is show up at the dealership and they're going to hand you the keys and give you this amazing car. So you show up, they give you, and you drive off the lot. Now, how do you know what fuel to put in that car? How do you know what maintenance to do for that car? Well, there's an owner's manual, right? Because the person who created the car knows what it needs as fuel to operate correctly. Now, you have been gifted this amazing body. This body is your vehicle to get through life. It's the most amazing gift we've ever been given. And the person who created the body is the one who knows what fuel it needs to run. And the user's manual is the earth. It is the earth. Now I want you to picture if you took that car and you drive off the lot and you either ignorantly or just out of some kind of rebellion put grape juice in your car, what is going to happen? You're going to be grounded. You won't even get home. But what if you put in fuel that just isn't formulated correctly? It's got the wrong percentage of octane. It's got some pollutants on it. You're going to get home. You may even drive for some years. But those subpar or inappropriate parts are going to slowly work their way through the engine, and they are going to gradually damage one part of the vehicle after another. And your car is eventually going to start to malfunction. Now, because it takes time, it would be very easy for you to blame the car when the problem is the fuel. And 99% of the time with our bodies, that is what has happened. We live in a cycle of continually repairing parts with our body, because they are just continually falling apart and one diagnosis adds to another and whatever, when the problem is the faulty fuel. But because it happens so slowly, you can't just look at it and go, oh, well, that bag of Doritos that I ate 6 years ago is the reason I now have an autoimmune disease, right? Like, we don't see the correlation because it takes time, but the correlation is very real. And how you can avoid that whole long, painful process that I have gone through and many, many others have gone through is by seeing how to use these cornerstones that the earth is trying to teach you, because they will guarantee that what goes in your body actually supports proper body function. Your body is the world's largest and most complicated puzzle. As I said, every single component of a food fits in a puzzle piece somewhere in your body to activate a body function. When those puzzle pieces don't quite fit, the body malfunctions. Here's a very precise example. This is what sugar looks like. It's literally two O's that are linked together. And when you eat this, your body knows what to do with it. It has an enzyme that splits it in half, and one half goes to your bloodstream and one half goes to your liver. And understanding exactly how that works and how to eat sugar in a way that supports your health will change your life. But for the sake of today, what I want you to see is the difference between that and these. Okay? These are artificial sugars. These are sugars that were created in a lab where they literally went in and they broke the shape on purpose in some way. And the reason that they did that was because the thought was, well, we know sugar is not good for us, but we like our treats and we don't want to use self-discipline. So let's make a sugar where the puzzle piece has changed its shape. And then it'll just go through the human body. It won't be able to fit in the right spot. So our body will just excrete it and we can have our sweet treats with no consequences. Well, that's a lovely thought, but that's not how the human body works. There is nothing that goes through our body without effect. Zero. Nothing ever goes through the body without effect. And when you put in a misshapen puzzle piece, what it does is it activates the wrong functions in the human body as it goes through. And so what they have discovered is that there is a whole host of diseases that are connected to these artificial sugars. And here's just one example. One of the main things that are the wrong shape, they will mess up 3 systems in your body first across the board. Anything that was not created by God, any of these synthetic compounds, the 3 systems they cause malfunction in first are the immune system, the reproductive system, and our hormone system. Those are the 3 systems. Those are really important systems. And the fact that those 3 are malfunctioning is why most of us are so sick. And what these do is they mess up the hormone system. And so despite the fact that they have 0 calories and we're supposed to be this free ticket to health, what they do is they actually cause your body to gain more weight, to be more hungry, to increase chances of diabetes and all sorts of things because they change the function of the hormone system in the human body as they go through. So how does this apply to food storage? Let's look at some really precise examples. If you want that strong structure that is resistant to disease, you have to keep your pantry free of synthetics that clog your system, that throw off your immune system, your reproductive system, and your hormone system. And 80 to 90% of the stuff in the grocery store has things in it that do that. You have to start reading labels of everything you eat so that you are not allowing these corporations to shut down the function of your body completely ignorantly because you have no idea what's in that bottle that you just ate. And here's a couple places to specifically look as you are looking at food storage. When you buy something that's in a metal can, we don't like our food tasting like aluminum, and aluminum is not good for you either. That's a neurotoxin. So what they have done is they coat those metal cans with a plastic liner. And all of you have seen that plastic liner. That's to keep the taste of the aluminum out of your food. However, that plastic liner is full of toxins. Full of toxins. And the number one thing that causes toxins to go out of plastic and into food is heat. So we coat it with this plastic toxic thing, and then we heat process the can, and all of the toxins go into the food. A lot of you probably work really hard to buy BPA-free bottles for your drinking water and all this stuff, because if you aren't aware of what BPA does, is that's a synthetic that disrupts your hormone system. That's why it's so detrimental. And we're trying so hard and on the surface to eliminate BPA for our health. Do you know where you're getting most of your BPA? You're getting it from the cans of your canned food because it's full of BPA and a whole host of others. It's not just that. So you need to think about that. If you are eating that Campbell's soup, you are loading your body full of toxins that are disrupting your immune system, your reproductive system, and your hormone system. And they're overloading your liver because then your liver is trying to get the poisons out of your body, which creates a whole nother host of problems. If your body is dealing with all of that crap, can you see why it can't fight off a germ? I mean, really, should we be shocked that if we are filling our body full of toxins every day and it is doing its very best to try to filter those out for us, is it any wonder our bodies don't have any energy left to fight off germs? Not at all. So start reducing the canned food in your food storage. Now, if you want to start with one thing that will make the most difference, start with tomato products. With tomato products, you've got a double whammy, because not only do you have the heat processing that's released all those toxins into your food, but the acid of the tomato continues to leach all those toxins out of the food. So in our house, there are no tomatoes, period, ever, that come from a metal can. They are either in a glass jar or they are dried. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. Drying tomatoes is a really cool thing. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But you want to try to start getting rid of the cans. And if you're freaking out and going, well, what do I replace that with? Stick with me. That's going to become apparent as we go. But be aware of what's happening if we suddenly are living on all packaged and all canned food. The toxin load in our body is going to be so high that we're going to develop illnesses from the toxins themselves, and we won't be able to fight off any diseases that may be around us. Another one to think about is, if lasagna can last 25 years, it's plastic, not food. And I'm not kidding. I don't mean that as a joke. It really has been chemically turned into plastic. Like, they have to modify the food to make it not go bad. But when it's been modified, it is a completely different puzzle piece. It's going to go in your body, and your body's not going to go, oh, food, thank you. It's going to go, what on earth is that? And it's going to freak out every system in your body. So please read the ingredients of the stuff that you are storing and make sure it's not full of preservatives, because those are things that are literally chemicals to change the function of the food so that it can't go bad. But food that can't go bad also cannot nourish your body. And if your thought is, okay, well then it's impossible to store food, that's not true. If you want to think of the greatest food storage story of all time is Joseph of Egypt, right? 0 food for 7 years. They had 0 food for 7 years. They lived on food storage for 7 years with no MREs. So it's totally possible. By the end of the class, you'll understand how to do it. But that is cornerstone number 1. You have to get rid of the synthetics and instead be eating the things the earth created for you. And then they will be the right puzzle piece match, so that when they go through your body functions according to its blueprint. If you put this other stuff in, you may have the best blueprint in the world, but your body can't pull it off. It doesn't have the blocks to do it. Okay, here's cornerstone number 2. Eat food in the form that God or nature created. And this is the one I'm going to go into the most specific depth about food storage, because this one is so powerful when it comes to food storage. Things in their natural state are the best match for our bodies. It's just the way it is. Once again, the earth was literally created not just to give you the right food to support your body's function, but actually to put it in the right form for you. And I'm going to show you 5 very specific examples of this, of how this works and how it specifically applies to food storage. Okay, so the first is the importance of whole food. So I want you to look at this apple and the apple juice. If you want to get into this in more depth, I talk about this in a lot of depth in my other classes. You can also look up Dr. Robert Lustig. He's a pediatric endocrinologist at the University of California, San Francisco. And he's on a crusade to try to get the world to understand this. Okay, when you have an apple, not only is that apple full of all these amazing enzymes, vitamins, nutrients that your body needs to function, the apple is actually constructed in a way that it will release them at the right time and in the right order in your body. Okay, if that isn't amazing, and if that doesn't prove, that alone doesn't prove the 4 cornerstones, I don't know what does, but it's literally constructed by God to release things in the right order and at the right stage in your body so that it completely nourishes your body. When we create apple juice, we isolate one aspect of that food away from the others. And we completely change how it functions in the human body. And what Dr. Lustig will show you with enormous scientific detail, or if you want to learn in my other classes as well, where I break it down for you, when we drink apple juice, it does as much damage to our liver as a beer. Think about that with our kids that we are filling full of fruit juice. It does as much damage to your liver as a beer. And so fruit juice alone can cause non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which is now being diagnosed in children. And this is why. The form matters. Oh my gosh, you guys, the form matters. And the earth is so smart, just trust it. Trust the form it put it in. If you want to dive in and learn all the biochemistry of why it works, it's fascinating. I love doing that. But most people don't, and that's fine because the earth has done all the work for you. Just trust it. So here's a way this applies to food storage. Dehydrated milk. Now, if dehydrated milk was just very gently low temperature dried milk, maybe we'd be okay, but that's not what powdered milk is. Powdered milk has gone through so many chemical processes that your body doesn't know what this is anymore. And so if you are storing this in the hopes of having a calcium source, throw it in the garbage. I mean, I don't ever, I'm not ever telling you guys to go through your food storage and throw things in the garbage, because if all else fails, when you need your food storage, there's probably someone else who won't understand this stuff who may want it and you can give it away. But when you are buying new food storage, this will not help you. Okay, this is not in the form that will support ideal function of the human body. You would be in much better shape to store a natural calcium supplement like coral calcium or something like that that's in the form it's created in nature than to try to store powdered milk, because this is so far from the right puzzle piece. You're going to stress your body out. You're not going to help it. Please also be aware of that milk is not the only way to get calcium in your body. There's many cultures all over the world who do not eat milk products at all, and they don't have osteoporosis. Many of the other things we're going to teach you here in this class would also give you the calcium you need. But if you want to store a calcium supplement, don't store powdered milk. It's not going to help. It's in the wrong form, and it will cause stress. Okay, here's another way this applies. The importance of raw food. I want you guys to think about how you feel after Thanksgiving dinner. That just, oh, right? That is not just because we tend to overeat. Even if you don't overeat, you're going to feel that way because it is a meal that is almost 100% cooked. And the truth of the matter is that your body does not produce enough digestive enzymes to digest your food. And that's not because God made your body defective. It's because the earth is designed to give us an enormous amount of raw food. And the raw food has the enzymes in it for us to actually be able to digest and extract the nutrients we need from both that food and some cooked food that's in our stomach. And so every meal needs to have as much raw food in it as we can. The stats on disease change dramatically when meals are over 50% raw. And you don't have to immediately jump in and try to go 50% raw. And I'm not an advocate of a 100% raw diet unless you're trying to actually reverse a specific disease, and then that can be very useful. But raw food as a component is incredibly important. And if you think about most food storage, it's all dead. Not only is it now mutated in the wrong form and full of synthetics, but it's dead. And that's going to have dramatic impacts on how your body functions. It needs raw food. It absolutely needs raw food. Okay, so I want you to think about this for a minute. How does nature store food? If you take out all the factories and you take out all the stuff, how does nature store food? Okay, there's 4 ways that nature stores food. One is through drying. If food just falls off the vine in nature and we do nothing else, it's going to do one of 2 things. It's either going to ferment or it's going to dry. And what's amazing is we know that when we can and process food, the nutrient value just plummets. We know that canned food has 25% maybe of the vitamins that it had to start with, and it has 0 of the enzymes we need. All the enzymes have been killed because it's not raw anymore. And so it just has so much less value to strengthen the body. But the amazing thing is if you look at the earth and how it stores food, when it dries food and when it ferments food, it increases the nutritional value. Are you wowed by that yet? Like, it increases, because in drying, and we're talking about low temperature drying here, you have to dry below 118 degrees. But if you dry below 118 degrees, all those enzymes stay alive and your food is still alive. You can be getting those enzymes you need in food storage from dried food if you dry it below 118 degrees. And you've concentrated it, right? So now there's more nutrition in a smaller place. And if you sun dry it, which is the way that nature does it, you're adding vitamins from the sun and those things as well. So you've actually increased the food, the nutrition in drying it. When we ferment, fermenting is how food has been stored for all of human history until this century, until the 1900s, until the last century. This is how food was stored. And it was supposed to be. Nature's so smart, because when you ferment your food, you can store it without any needs for refrigeration. So you can store food enormous amounts of time, and the nutrition goes up because we've added the probiotics and it's alive. Think about that. Guys, we don't need canning to have food storage. We do not need MRIs to have food storage. And the ways the earth is trying with all its might to teach us to do this increases the nutrition instead of taking it down. Oh, it's so amazing. And fermenting alone, if you've never fermented, I have other classes that teach you how to ferment. Not only does that give you all the probiotics that literally control your immune system, so I mean that changes your immune system more than any other single thing you can do, but it's also so much cheaper and so much easier than canning. So if you haven't delved into fermenting, that is something you want to do. The other 2 ways that nature preserves food for us is in naturally storable forms. There's so much food that the earth grows for you that you have to do nothing except have a root cellar to put it in. That's all you have to do. And here's how smart the earth is. I want you to think about what are the last foods to ripen before winter if you live in a climate with winter. They're your root vegetables, your winter squashes, and there's only one fruit. What's the last fruit to ripen? Apples. The only storable form of fruit is the one that the earth gives you right before winter. Go ahead. Try to convince me that's a coincidence and not a divine gift. All of the foods that ripen in October are naturally storable foods to get you through winter without having to can, without having to do anything, and are able to retain all their nutrition all winter long to help you. Can you start to see what I mean about God created the earth as a textbook? Not only did he give us everything that we need, but he gave it to us in a way to teach us how to use it, and so that it's supporting your health without you having to do a single thing. It's astounding. And then the last form that the earth does to store food for you is seed forms. These are things where all you have to do is dry them and stick them in anything, and they will keep for 6,000 years. Some of these, you don't have to do anything. So please, if you have one of these things that's naturally storable, don't can it. Don't can it and undo all the good that has been done. Okay, the earth worked so hard, just work with it. Okay, the third form that this is so important is unmutated forms of food. This is getting the puzzle pieces right. And one way I want to show you how this works is with fats. I have a whole class on fats so that you can understand exactly what fats help your body and which ones don't, and which ones to use for which, and all of that fun stuff. But here I want to show you one because this is incredibly pertinent to food storage. Okay, when we look at polyunsaturated fats, poly means many. So they have two bends in their structure. If you look at that cis form, that's what a polyunsaturated fat should look like. Okay, two bends, it looks like a V or a U or whatever you want to call that. That is the form that supports your body, and that goes into every neurological pathway in your body to make your brain work and your neurological system. It goes around every cell of your body to help control what gets in and out. This is really, really important. Fat is really important in the human body. But here's the problem. Polyunsaturated fats mutate really easily. So all they have to do is be exposed to heat, light, or oxygen, and they change shape. So let's see, what would the earth possibly do to try to protect you from having misshapen polyunsaturated fats? It would put them in forms where you can't get them into heat, light, or oxygen, right? Because it loves you. It's trying to help you. These are the vegetable fats: corn, soy, canola, all of these things, okay? These are fats that the instant you take them out of the plant, they mutate. So God made them so you couldn't get them out of the plant. You cannot stomp corn, no matter how long you try, and get the oil out of it. You can an olive, you can an avocado, you can a coconut, but you can't a corn. It doesn't work. He made that fat inaccessible to protect you. But in the 1900s, we thought we were smarter than God, and we started using chemicals, hexane in particular, to extract fat from vegetables. And then we created a culture where we told everyone that the other fats were bad for them and they needed to eat vegetable fat in order to further the economy of those fats. And we have now for 80 years put fats into our body that are misshapen, and boy, are we experiencing the consequences of that. Huge consequences. Studies show that if you fix your fats, you fix depression as effectively as antidepressant medication. Why? Because those fats are protecting your whole neurological system, and we've put the wrong ones in, and our neurological systems are not working, and there's so many other ways. So you need to have unmutated forms of food in your food storage if you want the human body to function. Okay, now let's talk about foods that fight disease. I'm sure all of you have heard that wheat is bad, that carbs are bad. This philosophy started with two books called Grain Brain and Wheat Belly, and I've read both of them. And these are done by scientists. This is not shoddy science, guys. This isn't hype. This is science. And they're showing why these things are having devastating effects on our health. But if you find the one little page in the one little corner where they actually acknowledge this in the book, it actually is not the foods that are the problem. It's the forms that we are eating these in. For all of human history, people figured this out thousands of years ago, people. We think we're smarter, but we're actually always dumber than our ancestors. People figured this out thousands of years ago, that if something is a seed, you need to do something. I want you to think about that. Can you throw a kidney bean in your mouth and chew it up? Can you throw a wheat kernel in your mouth and chew it up? You can't. The earth is trying to give you a clue, and it's telling you, do something to me before you eat me. If you take these grains, nuts, and seeds, and there again, in my other classes, we can go into that. We do go into this in great detail and show you how to do this with all the different types. But what you need to understand here is that as soon as you soak, sprout, or ferment these, all of the negative health effects go away. And people figured that out thousands of years ago. No one has eaten nuts, grains, and seeds unsoaked, sprouted, or fermented ever until the last 100 years. It didn't happen. And we are experiencing the consequences of that. So if you hear that carbs are bad, if you hear that wheat's bad, it's not the food, it's the form. And if you learn how to do these in the correct form, they are not harmful to your health. And food storage, this is huge, right? Because these are your naturally storable foods. You're going to have buckets and buckets and buckets and buckets and buckets and buckets of these. However, if you all of a sudden have to start living off of your food storage and you start taking these out of the buckets and you just start grinding them up and eating them, you're going to have enormous health consequences. So use this time to learn how to do these well. Learn how to soak, sprout, and ferment these seeds and grains. And then these are just like nutritional powerhouses in your food storage. If you know how to do that, soak, sprout, and ferment your grains and seeds, you can live on almost that alone. If you had that and some good fats, you would have all the nutrition that you needed if you knew how to do that. So make sure you take the time to do that, because it turns these into the nutritional powerhouses that probably are what got the people in Joseph of Egypt's time through those 7 years of famine. Because if you know how to do that, these will give you this and fat. You will have what you need. Okay, so let me just go back. So if you think about that, all of those different things, those show you why the form of the food is so important. And so as you're going through your food storage, and there'll be a summary of this at the end that show you how this applies to all the things you want to try to gather for food storage. But these are really, really important in order to be able to use our food storage to actually strengthen our structure. If you know how to do all of these things, and if you've gathered the right food to be able to do it, it doesn't matter how bad the emergency is, you are going to be able to have a strong body that's going to be able to take whatever comes at it and be able to meet it in the way our bodies were designed to do it. Okay, cornerstone number 3. We'll go through this a little bit quicker, but there's one really interesting way this applies to food storage that I want to show you. There's nothing more debated in the world of nutrition than how much to eat of a certain food: low fat, low salt, high salt, low carb, it doesn't matter. Pick, and you're going to find people on every side of the equation. The earth knows how to do this. So eat foods in the quantities the system is designed to provide for you. And for that, you've got to think without grocery stores. In a world without grocery stores, whatever food you're trying to look at and debate, does the earth provide it for you in abundance, or does it make it hard to get? If there's something that should be a foundational part of our diet, it will be relatively easy to grow or obtain in the natural environment. If there's something that's supposed to be sparse in our diet, it will be hard to grow or obtain in the natural environment. Here's 2 examples. Sugar, right? We all know we should eat more sugar. Okay, how does the earth grow sugar for you? It is a natural creation, so it's not evil, but how does the earth grow sugar for you? I got to go to the Dominican Republic where they grow sugarcane, and I wanted to see exactly how this works. And they grow the sugar, and it's a tree, like it's wood. You couldn't eat that if you tried. And so what they do is they burn it, and then they cut off the outside wood with a machete, and they sell the inside sticks on the roadside. And you have to chew it. You take a bite, you chew it, the sweet juice comes out into your mouth, and then you spit out the rest of the wood. So I want to ask you, how much sugar could you eat if you had to harvest it and chew it personally out of the sugar cane? The exact amount the human body can handle. We never had problems with sugar until we extracted it. And then we created absolute chaos in the human body. But the earth is trying to teach you how to eat sugar. And if you store it in the ways nature's trying to teach you to eat it, it will support your health instead of harm your health. Another example is greens. There's a big thing right now with green smoothies, but I want you to think for a second. Does the earth grow you 3 cups of spinach 365 days of the year? It doesn't, and there's actually reasons for that. When we eat even something as healthy as greens in very unnatural quantities, we can create some substantial problems. One of that is called oxalate toxicity, which is something we've dealt with in our house, and it's not a place you want to go, I promise you. But you can just trust the earth. The earth knows how to do this. And not only does the earth do this for you? It alters it for you based on where you live and what time of the year it is. Now, here's where I want you to stop and be wowed for a little bit. In a tropical climate where food grows every day of the year, does the earth grow carrots, potatoes, winter squash, and apples that can be stored? No, totally unneeded. If you live in a tropical climate, you're going to want to eat in a tropical way. If you live in a place with winter, like most of America, the earth is going to grow you root vegetables and all of these things so that you have good living food in the winter, and it's going to change what it grows for you based on the different times of the year. And then in the spring, when your body needs to do a detox, it's going to grow you all these beautiful greens. And in the summer, when it's hot, it's going to grow you all this beautiful fruit. And it's phenomenal. If you live in a Mediterranean climate, the earth grows you the right combination of foods there. If you live in the Arctic, this is a really important point. In the Arctic, they eat an incredibly high-fat, high-protein diet with just the natural berries and greens that they can harvest there at certain times of the year. Is there any grains in the Arctic? No, because a high-fat, high-protein diet combined with carbs is an absolute disaster for the human body. Meat and potatoes is a disaster for the human body. And so if you look at it, the earth is so smart that it doesn't put those two together, okay? You've got the Mediterranean climate where they eat lots of carbs and they eat low fat with just a little bit of raw olive oil and lots of fresh produce. And in the Arctic, what does the earth create? It's got all of this high fat animal product and no carbs. They both work. Create a global economy and start to cross the foods, and we have problems. So wherever you live, trust the system where you live, because the earth is so smart that it is trying to do this for you, for you, for you, for you, for you. It's trying to help you. The last cornerstone is eat by the sweat of your brow. And I go into a lot more detail than this often tonight because we've spent more time on some of the other cornerstones for food storage. I'm going to condense this a little bit, but this is really important. This is probably my favorite cornerstone because of how I personally learned this one. I was reading the story of Adam and Eve, right? And before they're sent out of the Garden of Eden into the world, they are told, by the sweat of thy brow shalt thou eat thy bread all the days of their life. Now, I had never believed that was a punishment. I had always believed that was God teaching them how to succeed in their new environment. But I'd always thought of it as kind of a, well, what you reap, you sow kind of thing. And then one day I got this bonk on the head while I was reading it and realized this is also about food preparation. So I want you to look at this story of Moses and the children of Israel and manna. This is the greatest food emergency of all time. The food supply was zero. And they didn't have food storage either. They weren't like Joseph of Egypt. There was nothing. And so God provided them food. And my whole life, as I'd learned about manna, I had seen pictures and movies of them picking up bread-like stuff off the ground. But when I went back and read the scripture, that wasn't what manna was. Do you know what manna was? Manna was a seed, and they still had to turn it into bread. Now, I want you to contemplate why that might be. If this is the greatest food emergency of all time, and these people don't have kitchens and they don't have plumbing, and they're having to get their food from heaven, why did God not give them bread? And I discovered that one of the essential cornerstones, if you take this one out, the other three don't work, is that God keeps everything in balance with the food in our body through the principle of work. There is no fast food from God, ever. The closest we get is apples and fruit that we can pick off the tree. That's the closest we get, but there's still a little bit of work to grow it and a little bit of work to pick it. There is no absolute instant. There is no unwrap and eat. drive through and eat. That does not exist in God's system. And it's not because he doesn't love us, it's because he does. It's an actual protection. And there again, I can go through the science of that in my other classes with you of all of the problems that solves. But here's what I want you to know. Next to parenthood and actually giving life, there is nothing we can do in a physical way that has more power to change what kind of life someone has than we do with food. Every time we feed someone, we are either building the cells of their body or we are destroying them. We're either giving them ingredients that build their brain, their immune system, their heart and lungs, or we are weakening all of those same things. So food is one of our greatest investments. It's one of our greatest gifts. It's not something we're supposed to escape from. It's not something we're supposed to take off the schedules and do other things. It is one of the greatest gifts we have from God, and it's one of the greatest gifts that we give each other. And he has literally built the system so that we interact with the food as we do it. And as we do it, there are just so many things in the system that does that protect us and give us the food that actually strengthens our body. It's an incredibly powerful principle that goes all the way back to God. It's that important. And so keep that in mind. That doesn't mean we have to have elaborate meals. We can have very quick meals. You know, some of the healthiest things take very, very little time to prepare. But it's the difference of thinking about interacting, investing, being a part of these meals and instant. It's that instant mentality, because the instant something becomes instant, it's broken all four cornerstones across the board every time. Because God built it in a way that you can't have instant food that supports the four cornerstones. So keep that in mind, that even in emergencies, when God was the giver, he did not take away the preparation. He didn't take that away. That's how important it is. Okay, so to use these four cornerstones together, here's what this looks like. When you're choosing what food to store, ask yourself these four questions. Is the food a pure natural creation? Is it as close to the form that was created as possible? Do the recommended quantities match what the system was designed to provide for me? And am I involving effort, or am I relinquishing that control to someone else? That will help you find the food that will create that incredibly strong structure for you. Now, I want to show you one more really key principle, and then we're going to actually make a little bit of a list for you, okay? This is not necessarily a cornerstone, but this is a divine principle that is highly applicable to food storage. If you study how God and nature give us food, they give us in abundance. Abundance, not in scarcity. Look at these three ways. The earth always gives in a way that multiplies. If you plant one seed, you get a multiplication back. And then that multiplication has seeds in it to create that multiplication again. The earth always gives in a way that multiplies. The earth always provides for another cycle. You will never run out of food if you do it the way the earth intends. And the earth always gives us enough and to share. It's interesting that in the crisis this year, one of the things that has disappeared from food storage or from shelves that people can't get is yeast. And that's really important if you want to be able to make bread from your food storage. Well, not really, because that synthetic store-bought yeast is not how God intended you to make your bread. If you make your bread from natural yeast, you will not only never run out, but you will always have enough and to share. And that's how God works. So think about that. If we are doing food storage in the way that God intended, you will see the principles of multiplication. You will see the principles of providing for another cycle. And you will see the principles of having enough and to share. So here's Now a summation of why traditional food storage is completely backwards to every single divine principle that I have ever discovered. The food tends to be full of artificial ingredients. The food is extracted instead of whole. The food is dead instead of raw. The food is processed into mutated forms. It's preserved in ways that deplete nutrition and add toxins. The grains and legumes and carbs are in foods that promote disease. The food is not in the proportions that nature provides. It's instant, bypassing that sweat of our brow preparation that increases our nutrition and health, and it's going to run out instead of promoting abundance. Can you see why traditional food storage, if we live on that, is going to make us deathly, deathly ill? It goes against every principle of health that God has ever created. Every single one of them, you guys, every single one of them. It is in complete defiance of every divine principle of health. So here's what 4 cornerstones food storage would look like. 1, you need water. You can survive without food, and in fact, there's reasons to survive without food for periods of time, but you can't survive without water. We need to have good water. 2, you need to be able to store those naturally storable fruits and veggies. So that can be something like a root cellar or a basement, or, you know, people, it used to be that no one didn't have a root cellar dug in either their basement or their backyard. And there are a million ways to do this, and you can Google it and find all sorts of options, so many ways to do this, but now's a really good time to do that, okay? Dried foods, we talked about how important dried foods are. They take less space than anything else, and they increase the nutrition. So instead of storing 50 quarts of tomato sauce, store this much of dehydrated tomatoes, and you can make your own tomato sauce whenever you want. Not only do you not have all the toxins in that, but you've decreased the storage space. So dried fruits are incredibly powerful. Fermented foods. Your immune system does not function without fermented food. Remember, no one ever in the history of the world has lived without fermented food on a daily basis until the last 100 years. It's one of the reasons our immune systems are not working right. Your body needs fermented food every day for your immune system to work correctly. So use this as a chance to learn how to ferment your food with the knowledge that it is faster, cheaper, and healthier than canning your own food. So it's a win across the board. Okay, make sure you've got your grains, nuts, beans, and seeds. Those are all completely naturally storable without any added anything. And learn how to soak and sprout and do natural yeast with those, because then they will be turned into a form that multiplies the nutrition in them instead of making you sick. So powerful. Hey, you need healthy fats, lots and lots of healthy fats. Fat is essential for your body to function correctly, absolutely essential. If you want to be able to get all the details of that, I have other classes that go into the absolute nitty-gritty of both fats and sugars, going over all the different forms, how to buy them, how to store them, what they do, what to use them for it. So if you want to dig deeper into those, I do have resources for that. You need a multi-mineral salt. Salt is also essential for human biological function, and it's essential for preserving your food in natural ways. Salt is only a problem when we extracted it and created table salt, where we took the sodium chloride out of its natural form. So buy natural multi-mineral salt that is exactly how it's mined from the earth. It won't be white, because it will have all those other minerals in it that your body needs for salt to function correctly in your body. You can get the Redmond real salt, you can get pink Himalayan salt. Those are the two I tend to use. Both are easy to get. Buy them in huge quantities. Don't go to the health food store, buy the little things. Buy them in 50-pound bags and put them in your food storage. You need salt. Having gardens and animals, that is how the world functions. That's how food functions, that multiplication process. Now, I know not everyone is in a situation where they can do that, but it is important to understand that is part of how natural food storage works. So if you aren't in a position where you can do that, you may want to make friends with someone who is. or think about how even in a small way you might be able to do those on a patio or something like that. But that is a part of the system. So in whatever way you can in your current situation, make sure that's part of your plan. If you are canning food, use glass bottles. We don't want all those toxins that are just going to completely torpedo the health of our body in our food storage. And then practice, 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 practice. When we aren't in an absolute crisis is the time to practice. The crises are good because they remind us what we need to do and that this is a real need. But when we're not in a crisis, that's the time to learn. That's the time to practice, because when we're in a high stress situation, it's hard to learn new skills. And it's as soon as there's a crisis, you can't buy any of this stuff, healthy or otherwise either. And so these are some things we have learned in 2020, having a crisis. Not only does all the junk food run out, and the junk food runs out first, which is sad to me because that shows that people don't understand that they have control over their immune system by what they eat. But even the good stuff runs out because more and more people are learning this. So get the stuff ahead and then practice ahead, and you will be prepared to have fabulous help in an emergency. And then you don't have to panic about being exposed to a germ. You don't have to panic about what you're exposed to. You don't have to panic about what horrible food might be being provided at some kind of feed, community center. You would have the stuff that you need, and that will provide the confidence and the peace of mind that will also help you in any emergency. So remember this is what we're shooting for, this left Lego block. And beyond food storage, this provides so many blessings. You want to live this way every day. You'll watch weight loss automatically balance without having to try. You watch diseases disappear. I am an absolute living proof of that. Diseases that cannot be cured, right? Yes, they go away. Need for prescriptions disappear. We have more energy and strength, more mental clarity, right? Because we're eating those things that help our neurological system actually work. Increased spiritual connection. This is one that I get feedback probably almost the most from people. And that is because God made your body. And when you eat the way He designed you to eat, you also get rid of all the junk that is standing between you and revelation. When our body is polluted, it gets in the way. And the more we eat this way, the more that spiritual connection expands. It's amazing. We don't have to worry about contagious disease because our body is resistant. We don't have to be overwhelmed with all these opinions that we hear. And you will have peace and joy with food again. Food is not meant to be stressful. It's meant to be a joy. And when we learn to eat this way, it truly becomes that again. Okay, so if you want to learn more, if you love this approach to the 4 cornerstones and you want to dig into all the science and all the specifics and all of the in-depth stuff, this is what I have online. It's called the Simply Divine Eating Online Academy. And it takes you through all of this one step at a time so it's not overwhelming. That is how I designed this system. You're going to learn one principle at a time, work on incorporating that before you go to the next, so that this is not a change your world overnight kind of thing. It's learning how to take one step at a time so that this does not have to be overwhelming. There's 12 hours of pre-recorded classes that take you through all of the details. There's an ebook, there's study guides, there's shopping guides, there's over 40 recipes. There's weekly emails that help you take that weekly one step at a time. And we have an online support group. So if you want to get in and get all the nitty gritty, I really encourage you to do this. It's a huge blessing and resource to have this library. It's available to you forever. All my classes are, and it's intended for all the members of your immediate household. Please don't start sharing this with your in-laws and your cousins and your whatever, but I do want everyone in your household to be able to learn this together and do this together. It's more powerful that way. You can repeat all of the classes as many times as you want because I teach incredibly in depth. You'll learn that really quickly with me, and so you'll benefit from the repeated. You'll get more stuff every time. And you can do it at whatever pace you want. If you wanted to go through all the classes in 1 month because you're in a time when you need to be able to do that, you can. If you want to take a year and do it slowly, you can. It's totally self-paced. So if you are interested in that, just go to simplydivineeating.com/academy. You can get all the details there. That's where you can purchase it. And I'm going to give you guys who've watched this to the end, because you're the ones that this resonates with, right? The coupon code MyHealth. That's going to give you 50% off, and I already have it 50% off on my website. So you can stack those two, and it is literally going to be 75% off. So make sure you use that if you're interested. You can get it incredibly cheap, and that includes a monthly payment, so that it's hardly anything. This won't impact your budget at all. I really want this to be available to anyone who wants to learn this information. So if you love this approach, if you are ready to learn how to live, to create that strong structure, and to put together your food storage in a way that will support you and your family's health no matter what situation, I hope this has been helpful. I put as much information in this class as I can, and then, like I say, if you want to dig deeper, I have so much more for you that will help you take this to a whole new level. So thank you. It's been an honor to be able to teach this to you today. I also have a YouTube channel, Simply Divine Eating. If you want to come and be able to learn, some of my other free classes are available there. And if you want to ask questions and be able to interact, come to the Simply Divine Eating community Facebook group. That is my Q&A headquarters, where we talk all things nutrition and health. You can ask any questions you want. There's a whole community of people there that can support you. I don't have the time to answer a whole bunch of individual emails. So if you have questions and want to interact, please join the Simply Divine Eating community on Facebook, and we can interact in a much more effective way there. So there's a whole bunch more resources for you. Thank you. Good luck. I hope you enjoy putting together your own healthy food storage, and that you'll feel confident and feel so much peace in knowing how to do that in a good way. So I will see you online. Thanks.